Well, good morning, Park. How y'all doing? That was pretty weak. How you guys doing out there? You alive? You awake? Just give me a hand clap. All right. Well, again, it's a joy to be here this morning to have the opportunity to share God's word with you this morning. As Lisa said, my name is Nathan Payne. I serve here as a location pastor. I stepped into that role just a couple months ago, so I serve alongside Jackson in that role, and I also have the privilege to serve here at Park as one of our elders, and it is one of my life's greatest joys to serve here at Park, to have a front row seat to see how God is working in and through your lives, and what a joy it is. Well, we'll be in the book of Exodus. We're going to be in chapters 17 and 18 this morning, so if you want to grab one of those blue Bibles that'll be under the seat in front of you or in the stadium seating behind you, turn to page 59, or go ahead and pull it up on your device, whether it's your phone or something else, so we'll jump in together. But I want you to go with me back to the 80s, back to the fall of 1987 to be exact, and I think for some of us in here, you weren't even alive during that time. And we're going to go back and we're going to look in the backyard of a Texas home and property where a little 18-month-old girl named Jessica is playing alongside her cousins. Her mom steps inside the house for just a second, and within moments, she hears screams of the other children, frantic. Of course, you can imagine as a mom to a young child hearing those screams, thinking, what's happened? She runs out and they discover that little Jessica has fallen into a 22-foot deep well that's only 8 inches in its diameter. She's trapped. She's not able to get out. And of course, as a mom, her mom's thinking, is she going to be okay? Is she alive? Is what's going to happen? Of course, they initiate and call all the emergency personnel, firemen, policemen, and anyone else, paramedics who could do anything about the situation. And like I said, this was back in the 80s, so this was before they had that thing called the internet. So the world is watching on CNN, and the cameras are there as they're riveted by this story of baby Jessica. And all the experts, the expertise drawn together, trying to figure out how can we rescue this little girl. Well, it took 56 hours of her being in that well. After a combination of the efforts of the fire personnel and the paramedics, and they enlisted the help of those who had expertise in mining and drilling, and they crafted a tunnel, and a guy named Robert O'Donnell reaches through as he inches his way through where she is at the base of that well and pulls her out to safety. See, it was the combination of their shared resources, their power, if you will, that brought them together where they shouldered the weight, they carried the weight of that rescue, and it saved her life. Well, this morning as we enter into the book of Exodus in chapter 17 and today's story, we're reminded of our God who reveals himself through his power and through his people as he comes to rescue. Let's pray for a second. God, we invite you now to speak to us. We invite you, oh God, to lift our eyes up to you. And God, may those who are gathered here, may they be encouraged by your word. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we're in this Exodus series, as you know, and we've been talking about, and Exodus as a book is all about God revealing himself to a watching world. And we could look at the early part of the book to see him say that that's what he's going to do as he comes to rescue his people. He was going to show them that he indeed was God. Look at the early parts of the book in chapter 7 and 8 and 10. It says, hey, God's saying this, that the Egyptians will know that I am God. He says that the Pharaoh himself, who thinks he's a God, is going to know, no, I am God. And then he says, Moses, even you, even your kids, even your kids' kids, your grandkids, the people of Israel themselves will know that I am the Lord. The book of Exodus is all about God revealing himself for who he is. Well, as we step into today's story, we are having gone through, watched the Israelites delivered from Egypt, and they've crossed the Red Sea, and like Jackson spoke about last week, they came to a place where they were stopped at a rock because they were thirsty, and God delivers them, and they have just come through in a place called Rephidim. Now, when Jackson teaches, he uses a map, so I thought I'd bring a map up. But as you can see, unless you have super telescopic vision, you can't even see what that map says. So all that to say is that the bottom tip of those colors is about where they are in Rephidim. And the pattern that we see with this people is that they have crisis, they are rescued by a God who loves them and intervenes, they celebrate, and then they go through a trial and they go through unbelief again. And here at Rephidim, they've experienced that. They had seen God deliver them with the plagues, part of the Red Sea, and then they start complaining about food. God delivers them. They start complaining about water and grumbling, and God yet provides for them. I know on a morning like this, many of us, as we think about the story of God working in the Exodus, we think that happened a long time ago, and those people, if we were there, we wouldn't be like them. But I have to ask you on the honest planet this morning, be honest, just say, self, I'm going to be honest with the pastor this morning. How many of us this morning could say that last week or this past week we complained about how hot it was? Come on, raise your hand. Just raise your hand. There ain't no shame in here. It's too hot. It's too hot. It got up to like the 90s at Tuesday and Wednesday. And yet, I want to ask you this. 3 months ago to the day, on April 14th, 2019, do y'all remember what happened? This was outside in front of my house, and we had Sunday. It was a Sunday. It was a Palm Sunday, and it was like snowing. It was like, Chicago, please stop doing this to me. Let me see the sun. I haven't seen the sun in 6 months. I need to get a little more tan up in here, And yet, 3 months ago, we were like, I just wanted to get warm. I wanted to get hot, please. Now, 3 months later, not even 3 months later, we were complaining about how hot it was. You see, I think we're a little bit more like the Israelites than we might want to let on. So what happens after this people of Israel? Earlier in this passage in 17, they go through the water incident where God provides for them. And what happens? Look at verse 8. It says that then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. These are the Amalekites, and these are people who descended from Esau, who was the brother of Jacob. So Jacob was a forefather of the Israelites, and his brother Esau, they didn't get along, if you remember that story. And you see some of the tension playing out in their descendants. And the thing is, though, it says that they fought with them, but to get a little bit more detail about how they attacked the Israelites, you have to note in Deuteronomy 25, when Moses is recounting all that God has done, it says this: remember what Amalek did to you, the Amalekites did you on the way as you came out of Egypt, how they attacked you on the way when you were faint and weary, and cut off your tail those who were lagging behind you. And he did not fear God, speaking of the Amalekites. See, the Amalekites attacked the people of Israel in the worst kind of way. When it says they cut off the tail, that means that there's this long convoy of people, and you can imagine that in a convoy of people with animals walking and people walking, that those who at the end are those who are the slowest, those who are the most vulnerable. These are the elderly. These are people who are sick. These are the moms with their little toddlers walking alongside them. These are the people that the army of Amalek comes against. I'll note what God says through Moses. Go out in verse 9. Go out and fight with them. Now, up to this point, specifically when God has intervened, he has not had them do anything. And matter of fact, he says at the Red Sea, it says, stand back and be silent. That's all you got to do. But now he's saying, you have to suit up. But imagine being in that place where they're not trained warriors. They don't have the weapons of an army, and God is saying, suit up. The reality is that for them to go into battle meant that they had to trust that God would rescue them, that God would secure the victory. And I know that in a place like this, on a morning like this, there's some of us who are in a situation where you are being tested beyond your capacity, beyond your experience, beyond your knowledge, beyond all that you have, your own resources, and God is saying, step into the battle. And underneath that, he's asking you, will you trust me to be your rescuer? Well, look what God does. Remembering that he reveals himself through his power and through his people. Notice that Moses says to them that he's going to take the staff of God. He reads it verses 11 through 13. He's going to take the staff of God, the one staff that he had from the beginning. Remember, it was the staff that he carried as a shepherd when God appeared to him in the burning bush. It was the staff that he carried to demonstrate to Pharaoh God's power. It was the staff that he touched the Red Sea with when it parted. It was the staff that he hit the rock with that provided the water. The staff of God, he's going to hold it up. And it says that if he held it up, as long as he held up the staff, the Israelites would win. And when he would drop his hands or his arms, the staff would go down, they would start to lose. Now, I don't know if this means that when he had his arms up that God was exerting a special power that was defeating them, or if it was as they were seeing what represented God's presence and provision that they were encouraged and fought harder. But all I know is that at the end of the day, God was the one who got the victory. But if you notice an important detail in verse 12, it says Moses' hands grew weary. And what do? They have to put a stone under him to hold him up, that Aaron and Hur come alongside him and hold his hands up, one on the one side, the other on the other side. This word weary is better translated. It's a Hebrew word, and it actually connotes the idea of being too heavy. That Moses' hands, as he's trying to hold up the staff, as God is going to rescue his people, revealing himself through his power, that his hands get too heavy and they start to drop. But his friends, Aaron and Hur, come alongside him and hold him up. And so they win the battle. But it's not because Moses had the strength to hold up his hands. And even though his friends came alongside and helped him hold up his hands, it was God revealing his power through them. It reminds me of just the other day. Well, not the other day. It was yesterday, y'all. You know, people say, oh, the other day. It was yesterday, bro. Come on. And I have to tell you that I am married to my wife, Gabrielle. She's here with a few of my kids, and we have a big family. Some of you guys know that, some of you don't. We have 7 kids. Now, what that means is this. It means a lot of people feel sorry for us. That's what it means. I mean, it's like I'm at staff, and people are like, we have some extra food, man. You want to take it home to your kids? You know, it's like, hey, we want to feed you because we know it's a challenge. And thank you for that. Thank you for that. But someone here in our body determining that, yes, you need to feed your kids, they had a grill that they no longer needed and they wanted to get rid of it. And so they were like, hey, we want to give you a grill. So we got this grill, as you can see a picture of it here. But the thing is that this grill, in order to get it up onto the area where we're going to use it, I would have to lift it. And for the brothers in the house who are a little bit younger than me, you know how it is when you're young. I can see a buff brother back there. You know, you walk like this, you're like, man, I got this. You might be with your girlfriend. She's like, do you need some help with that? You're like, no, I got it. Or your wife is like, babe, I think that's a little bit too much. You're like, no, I'm good. I wasn't good, y'all. I wasn't good. And I knew it. So I had to have my 13-year-old son, Gabriel, help me get this grill up. Now, the thing is, we had to get it up some stairs, so I put a little plank down. I'm like, I'm going to pull, you're going to push. Now, the thing is, I'm a little bit weaker than I used to be, and so at one point, I'm trying to pull this grill up the stairs with my son, and it's too heavy for me. And at one point, he's literally holding the whole grill up. This thing is like a couple 100 pounds. It wasn't until this morning I realized, I literally put my son's life at risk for a grill? Okay. Woo! All right. Pray for me, y'all. But thankfully, he actually is a little bit stronger than me a little bit, and so he actually held this thing up, and I'm like, okay, we pull it up, we get it up on the deck, and we get it on there, and it's taken care of, because the thing is, it was much too heavy for me to carry by myself. And I know this morning that there's some of us here who you've been through or you're going through a time where things are a bit heavier than you can handle yourself. Maybe you're facing an addiction to pornography. Maybe you're addicted to substances that you put in your body, inject, snort, drink. I don't know. Maybe you're facing the loss of a child. Maybe you just got a diagnosis from the doctor that says that it's cancerous, and you're in the fight of your life, and it's too heavy. Maybe that's you. But we're reminded in this text that God reveals himself through his people, through his power, and that we're not alone, that there's others to come alongside of us. And he delivers his people. Let's keep looking at the story. Look at chapter 18, verse 1. It talks about a guy named Jethro who we meet, but not for the first time, almost like we're re-meeting him, because he's mentioned earlier in the book of Exodus in chapters 2 and 3, and he's described in a couple of ways as the father-in-law of Moses and as the priest of Midian. He's bringing Moses' wife and his sons to meet Moses, who we believe were left with them while Moses went to Egypt and wanted to make sure they were safe while he was certainly going to encounter some danger. But you need to note something. Whenever you're reading scripture, be sure to pay attention to the details, the titles that people have, and how often it's repeated. And repeatedly, Jethro is described as the priest of Midian, a title of religious authority and position, but we don't know a priest of what. There's not an indication that Jethro is yet a follower of the one true God. For all intents and purposes, Jethro was likely someone who worshiped the gods that were known to him in his culture in that region of the world. But something happens that Jethro now is trying to come and see and talk to Moses. What happened? Well, the reality is that when the word spread across the known world that the most powerful king and most powerful kingdom in all the world was defeated by some god that we never heard of, everybody was like, man, what happened there? The Egyptians just got whooped. Well, what does Moses do? Look at verse 8. It says that Moses then told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake. Tells them all about the hardships that had come upon them in the way and how the Lord had delivered them. So when they sit down and talk, Moses is telling Jethro about everything that the Lord had done. He's telling about the plagues. He's telling them about the Red Sea. He's telling about how God provided manna for them, how he had provided food for them, how he had provided water for them, how he had defeated the Amalekites on their behalf. Now, those of us who are Cubs fan in the house, we got any Cubs fans in here? Cubs fans? All right, all three of us. In 2016, during the World Series, when the Cubs finally won one after 195 years, I'm exaggerating, it was in the seventh inning. Do you all remember this? The ninth inning, the ninth inning is the seventh game, the last game of the series. Whoever won this one would win it. And so it's tied at the ninth, and then there's a rain delay, and then they come back out, and the Cubs get some hits, and I just remember Ben Zobrist getting that go-ahead RBI, right? And it was like amazing. Everybody's screaming and hollering, and then the Cubs win the series as they close it out. Now imagine you hear that the Cubs win the World Series, but you didn't see the game. What do you do when you hear they won the World Series? You turn on your TV and you're like, I want to see the highlights. I want to see what happened. Or you talk to your friend and say, hey girl, tell me what happened in the game. Who won? How did it happen? How did they score? So Jethro is sitting across from Moses getting the play-by-play of everything God did. And God is revealing himself through his power. Look what happens to Jethro. It says, Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel in that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians at verse 9. He literally is filled with joy. Now, as far as we can tell, the last time that Jethro had seen Moses was when Moses was heading off to Egypt to confront the world's biggest superpower, the most strong king, the strongest king, strongest army, all that strongest kingdom. And the last time he saw him, he's like, okay, Moses is going off to Egypt carrying a wooden stick. Now you can imagine that Jethro, being a father-in-law, was probably polite, but in his mind, as he's seeing Moses walk off, he's like, Moses, okay, he's doing that. Y'all know what I'm talking about, that fake smile and wave, like, hey. But inside, he's like, this dude is crazy. He's out of his mind. But what happens when Jethro's skepticism is confronted with God, what God actually does? I know that as I've heard many of your stories and you shared your stories, some of you, when you became a follower of Jesus, maybe you were the first person in your family to become a follower of Jesus. When you told your coworkers, or you told your brother, or you told your sister, when you told your guys you used to hang with, when you told your girls you used to go to the club with. That was me dancing, y'all. You know, you can laugh at that. I'm working on it. But when you told them, they looked at you, and usually they would say something like, "Aw, that's good for you." And then once you walked away, what would they say in their minds? The back of their mind would be like, I think she's crazy. Why? Why? Because they knew the odds of what you were facing. When they say, wait, you're saying that a God has come to rescue you? To rescue you? Wait, you're the one that we've been watching. You've been addicted to alcohol for as long as we've known you. You haven't been able to break that. We've seen that you've been depressed and hopeless for such a long time, and you've been living without purpose. And how can you tell me that why should we believe that a God comes to rescue you? You have a mindset and a way of dealing with people where your anger just has control of you, or where you run over people and do whatever it takes for your own happiness. To think that somehow there's a God who will rescue you, you're crazy. And yet, what can't be denied is when God shows up in power and rescues his people, he reveals himself. And so for some of us this morning, we need to be reminded that, yeah, they might think we're crazy, but when we tell the story of what God has rescued us from, it tells people, it reveals God's character and who he is. And so maybe your family says you're crazy, but they can't deny the change that's happening in your life. You can't deny what he has done for you. Let's look at Jethro. He says this in Verse 11, blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hands of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. That's verse 10. And in 11 it says, now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods. I know means that Jethro has gone from not just intellectually assenting to that, but there's something that fundamentally has changed in his heart as a consequence of someone who is testifying, witnessing to God's rescuing power. So God has revealed himself to Jethro through the power that he demonstrated and through his people. He goes ahead and brings a burnt offering and a peace offering to God. The burnt offering in verse 12, it's an indication of his total devotion to the one true God. The peace offering, which he shares a meal with not only the elders of Israel, representing the people of God, but also it says that they ate in the presence of God, that there was now a relationship that happened with him and God that was not there before. That Jethro, because of what Moses testified, that because Moses talked about what God did, that Jethro now can become a follower of the one true God. And maybe you need to share your story more. Maybe you need to tell it more. Maybe you need to be vulnerable enough to say what God has rescued you from. And I have to ask you this question this morning. What's your rescue story? I didn't say what Bible verses do you know? And it's good to know Bible verses. I didn't say how long have you been coming to Park, although it's great and I want you to keep coming. I didn't say how long have you been serving, how many small groups have you led. I asked this question because it's the witness and the testimony of what God has done. What is your rescue story? Because God reveals himself through his power and through us, his people. Let's look at verse 13 and what goes from there. It says the next day after Jethro has now become a true follower of God, the one true God. And the next day Moses is setting up to have all the people come to him to bring their disputes, it's civil disputes, all their arguments, and he is going to settle them. And verse 13, you look at that and it says there's so many people around him, they're crowded around him and they stand in line all day to hear from Moses. Now, how many of us in the room have been to the DMV? You're just like, look, I just want to get a license. I want to go in, get my picture taken, have someone hit a button to print it, and then walk out. But no, you stand in line for 4 hours for your license. And you get tested, you get frustrated. You're like, why is it taking so long? They took my photo. Just hit print. And yet here, this massive group of people standing around Moses, waiting for him. They're frustrated, I'm sure. They're angry. They're people pushing each other. I was in line first. And what does Jethro do? What does he say when he sees all this? Look at verse 18. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for this thing is too heavy for you. You're not able to do it alone. So when Jethro sees this, he's basically saying to Moses, hey, what in the world are you doing? Trying to do all this for all these people. Why are you trying to do this alone? It's too heavy for you. Moses was trying to carry too much. Now, I don't think it was because Moses had any, bad motives. I don't think it was because he was trying to do something sinful or wrong. He was trying to help his people, but it reveals in him something of his mindset that it all depends on me. And I bet you there's some of us who have either struggled with that or are struggling with that mindset that it all depends on me, which underneath that is a way of saying, I don't trust anyone. Even I'm not really sure if I can trust God either. But what does Jethro do? he gives Moses some advice that is going to help him, because remember, God reveals himself through his power and through his people, and Jethro is now one of his people. He gives Moses some advice, and it's important to note that Moses, this is a guy who was used by God to be at the forefront of all those acts of God's mighty power revealing himself. He's the spiritual leader of this group of people, and Moses literally is unable to see something that's plainly obvious to those closest to him. And it's a caution for all of us. It doesn't matter what role we have. I have the privilege to serve as a pastor here. There's many of you who serve as leaders in our church, whether small group leader or a deacon or any other ministry roles. And the fact is that if Moses is able to miss something so close to him, all of us certainly can as well. And what does Moses do? How does he respond? I got this. I don't need you, Jethro. I don't think he said it that way, but I just imagine him being a brother. Like, man, what are you trying to tell me what to do? No, Moses listens humbly, receives that advice and that wisdom, and sets up a structure that provides civil and authoritative care for the people, and it blesses him and everyone else. And so maybe for us, when we're trying to carry too much weight, maybe the challenge for us is to be willing to receive from others who are right around us and recognize that we don't see it all and we need the help of other people. So how does that apply to us today here? Even in our church, we're reminded that the church itself, we talk about this idea of carrying the weight, bearing the weight together, that we, the people of God, bear the weight together. Look at Ephesians chapter 4, and it says this. He gave, in verse 11 and then 12, he gave apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, for building up the body of Christ. And what that means is that ministry leaders, whether you're serving as a deacon or a small group leader or any other role, that you're part of what it means for us as God is revealing himself through his people, that we carry the weight. So in our church here, Park, when you serve as a small group leader, and I can see some of you all today, when you take that extra hour to work through a conversation with someone who's just lost their job or wrestling with some of life's questions, you carry the weight. When you serve as a leader in Alpha, as people are navigating who this Jesus is and wrestling with their doubts and their questions, as you serve a meal in the name of Jesus, you help carry the weight. When you sit down with a new mom as a mom's group leader and you're walking with her, she just had this new baby, and wrestling with all the transitions in her heart and mind, you help carry the weight. When you stand across and show up in the lives of students in their teenage years and the everyday moments of life, you carry the weight. When you take God's word and explain the gospel to a 4-year-old, you carry the weight. So my question for us this morning: what weight do you need to start carrying as part of his body, as part of God revealing himself through his people? Well, I don't know what weight you're carrying today. Maybe you're here this morning and you're facing an obstacle like the Israelites when they faced the Amalekite army, where they are outmatched beyond their resources. And maybe you're in the midst of facing something where you recognize that you're in need. Or maybe you're here this morning saying, I got it, I'm good, I got this on my own. Whether you're here or whether you're there, I need to remind us this morning that the reason that we can gather here this morning and have the confidence that God, who rescues and reveals himself through his power and his people, the reason we can have confidence is not in ourselves. It's actually because of what his son did, Jesus. You see, when Moses held up the staff to provide God's presence and power for him to deliver, it pointed to a greater Moses, someone greater than Moses, who would stretch out his arms, holding up, if you will, a staff, thinking about Jesus hanging on the cross. It says that as he was carrying the cross, that it literally was too heavy for him to carry physically, so someone had to come alongside him as he dragged that cross. But at the end of the day, he was the one who was nailed to the cross. And the weight of his body, on the way that you would die within crucifixion, was that your weight of your body would pull you down so you could not breathe. So literally, Jesus gave up his life bearing the weight. Bearing not just the weight of his own physical body and the physical pain, but bearing the weight of our sin, bearing the weight of our mindset of independence, our willingness to pursue our own authority, to pursue our own interests at the harm of anyone else. That Jesus gave up himself. He bears the weight of our addiction, our anxiety, our fears, our insecurities. It says in 1 Peter chapter 2, he himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that is the cross, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. So Jesus acts as a divine rescuer to a people like us who so often complain and grumble and are so focused on our own desires, and yet in his goodness, he bears the weight. So I want to remind you that whatever situation you're in, that you can look to the cross of Jesus. But not only does the cross deliver us and rescue us, it also empowers us and compels us to then go and bear the weight for others. You see, it's in the life and the work of what Jesus has done and bearing the cross for us and dying on the cross for us that he points the way that how we can serve each other. Look at Galatians chapter 2. It says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ, the example of Christ. And when I think about that, I think about some of your stories. I can see one of you even now who you've been serving here for so long. You're struck with an illness and people have come alongside you and provided meals for you and prayed with you and prayed over you. I can think of a story, Nate and Catherine, when just a couple years ago, when their little baby boy, Joey, he was born and he had some deficiencies in his body, and that little boy only survived a number of days, and the whole community came alongside them in their grief, provided meals, helped celebrate that child's life. And as I was walking out earlier today, she stopped me. I saw Catherine and she said it was the people of God who came alongside us and carried the weight. I remember my friend Tom, who was a partner here, Tom and Kim, and I mentioned them before, but Tom, who loved Jesus, Kim, who loved Jesus, part of this body, serving in so many different ways. And just a few months ago, his body was stricken with cancer. He had been diagnosed and it came back with a vengeance, and it affected his eyesight, and it began to affect the rest of his body as his body began to get weaker and weaker. And at the bedside, Kim, being so devoted to him, with him, many of you all provided meals for them so they didn't have to think about it. He had a service dog because he couldn't see very well, and her name was Nora, and Nora would often be sitting right over in this area when Tom was in the service, and Nora became an issue because Kim couldn't take care of Nora and be at the bedside with Tom as he was passing away. And here you stepped in, and guys like Vince and others in Authentic Manhood, and said, no, we're going to help carry the weight. And so Kim got to be with her husband, with her heart being focused on where he was and what he was doing, while she didn't have to worry about all these other details because people came alongside and carried the weight so that she could be there when he finally passed away and went into the arms of Jesus. So this morning, maybe you're like Jethro, or you're religious, you're at church, but maybe today is the day that you have to take that step and actually trust in the God who reveals himself through his power and his people. And today can be the day where you can say, I know now. Or maybe today is a day where, as a follower of Jesus, it's now your turn. It's now your time to be reminded that in this, we all carry the weight together, because here's the thing: God reveals himself through his power and through you, through me, through us, his people. Let's pray. God, thank you for your word. Thank you for this day. Thank you for the truths that you've reminded us, that you have indeed carried the weight for us, that you indeed have been a God who stepped into our weakness, our unbelief. You've stepped into our pain. You stepped into our doubts to bear the weight. And so we are so grateful this morning to be able to sing in response that you are a mighty warrior who comes to our aid, that you, the rescuer, and rescuing us, you reveal your power, you reveal yourself through us. So we give you praise and ask that all of us in this room would be able to say, along with Jethro, now we know personally the God who has revealed himself to us. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.